And this is the fourth session in track 1, Introduction to Agile. I'd like to remind everyone that all attendees have been remuted and the discussion is being recorded. If you have questions, please leave your contact information and questions in the chat. And I would now like to turn the mic over to our moderator for the session presentation, Chris Harshman, Executive Director of IT, Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College. Chris?
Hi, everybody. I have the pleasure of announcing our next presenter, Jennifer Birch. Jen is the Senior IT Project Manager at the University of Michigan, is going to talk to us today about Agile. As I have learned, everyone from big team participants to solo people can learn something from how to apply Agile in their daily lives, how to complete and execute, how to continuously improve. So I'm looking forward to learning more about Agile. Jen, take it away.
All right, and I already gave everyone the quick apology. I have construction being done out in my yard, so it is very noisy. I am not known for talking loud, so if you struggle to hear me, please go ahead and say something in the chat, and I'll try and raise my voice and remind myself to speak up clearly. All right, give me the share option, and I will go ahead and share my screen.
All yours. By the way, you're coming through very clearly on my end, so you sound great.
Perfect. I don't have quite the headset that Chris has. Chris has this like really professional microphone sound to him. Like we tease him that he could be a radio announcer. At least my Jabra does a decent job. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right. I don't know how many people we actually have in this group who are old enough to remember the Brady Bunch. Chances are probably only like maybe a fifth of us, maybe. But does everybody remember Marsha, Marsha, Marsha? I swear the first time I ever heard anybody mention Agile, it was like the buzzword and everybody was talking about it and they kept dropping Agile all day long. But I never really heard anybody use it in the right context. And it got to be such a thing that I developed a passion for learning as much as I could about it because it was such a prevalent thing out there. And I felt like there's got to be more to this. There has to be something there that is useful, or else it wouldn't be such an interesting topic to be talking about everywhere. So I joke, everybody's going to drop it. They're going to say Marsha, 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 Agile, 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 but it's really not that complicated, folks. There's some basic principles that you can learn about it, and I think a lot of us can benefit from it on a regular basis. So real quickly, I just mentioned I'm a fan of Agile. If you want to talk to me about anything Agile offline, I'm more than happy to share some of my experiences with those things. I've been a project manager for 20-some plus years now, and I've worked in a variety of environments. I've filled the role of a help desk analyst, a database analyst, a release manager, an actual staff manager. I've worn a number of hats, but all across it all, I've been a project manager. It's a calling, if you will, for a lot of us to try to coordinate and organize and make things successful. And so no matter what role I filled, I think I always was gravitating towards that management of projects and initiatives and things that needed to be tangible and something as an outcome. If you want to learn more, I've got a few certifications and I keep adding to them. You want to learn more about me, go ahead and check out my EDUCAUSE profile or my LinkedIn profile. I don't want to spend too much time talking about all of my background here, but if Kathy's still with us on the call here, I'm also an oddball. I never take myself too seriously. I'm always the person who's cracking jokes, and even in the PMO, in the ITS PMO, I've been unofficially named the cruise director just because I like to have fun. And you will find that I can be serious when the need arises. But for the most part, I'm probably going to crack jokes most of the time and have some fun with it. My goals for you, hopefully, is that first and foremost, we're going to gain some clarity on what Agile is and what it's not. I will share some more examples. I tend to try and tell some stories to explain examples of where Agile has been effective and where I feel like we've had the most successes with it. And then I'm going to try and spin things a little bit more into giving you some tips for how you can develop your own agility. So first, I think I'm going to backtrack and we're going to go and say what Agile isn't. So we say it's something to do things faster. It's not a ticket to like bypass anything important. It's not a go get free pass to be able to not do documentation, to not have to look at any of the details, to just fly by the seat of your pants. It's not a way for you to, it's not a magic ticket to make the teams go so much faster and get things moving even quicker. I mean, you still have work and you still have the same amount of team members. It's just a way of looking at the things you need to do and trying to prioritize what makes the most sense and delivering things that make more sense because they're valuable to your customers. So don't look at it as a cure-all for development challenges. Agile has its place, DevOps has its place, ITIL has its role. Collectively together, they can handle more. But Agile has a bad name. We tend to think of it as we don't think things through and we just go. That's not actually what Agile does. And in most cases, unless you're very comfortable with Agile and you've been doing that and practicing it, you want to give yourself some time to transition and shift into that type of thinking. So I'll tell you a little bit later some best practices about that, but just know that it's not a way for you to avoid having to put some effort and thought into things. What it really is a collection of guiding values and principles. It's a thought process, a way of operating. It's a way of saying that, while we value all those things that comprise a service or a product and delivering them, we put more value on certain things than we do others. So if you always want to look back at the manifesto, or if you're always wondering what the end game is, look back at the manifesto. And a quick tip for anyone who's looking at taking like the PMI ACP certification exam, writing that manifesto out right at the beginning and then looking back at it later on is going to save you so much heartache, because they're going to give you questions that are going to say, should I do this or should I do this? And one's going to make sense in the traditional waterfall world, and the other one makes sense in Agile. So they both make sense, but you're in the Agile test and you want to keep looking at that manifesto and saying, these are the things that I am putting more weight on. So it's a framework. It's not prescriptive. It is flexible. It is meant to be, again, that mindset or that thought process behind getting things done. One of my favorite things after I dove into learning about Agile is just how it shifts that thought process and how that shift can actually play a role in real life. And so, it's an interesting way of tackling things, especially if you're a traditional project manager who likes to control stuff. Agile is more about working with the change rather than preventing it. And so you're going to find that it's a thing that you need to make some baby steps in, probably. But real quick name drop here, if you ever get a chance to go to a training session with Ron Jeffries, he was the gentleman that was one of my Scrum Master trainers, and he is a blast. He's hilarious. He's actually retired now, but once in a while he comes out and does some Scrum training with folks, and do take a class with them. You'll have so much fun. And he has he's had so much experience with it that you'll learn applicable practices with it as well. All right, so I'm going to jump real quickly into the best practices conversation. If you take anything away from today, remember that it's about quickly delivering customer value. Well, this is really tricky because a lot of times development teams will be looking at things from the perspective of their own effort or the value to the business or the organization or the department that they work for, and not necessarily the customer. That's the wrong way to look at it. And this is a hard thing for leadership to embrace too, because they want to look at it from the business perspective. And the reality is, and I've heard people saying this in other sessions as well, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the customer. So know your customers, know what they put value in, and then try to quickly deliver that to them. So don't wait for perfect, wait for something that's useful and valuable for them. And that's why you hear people talking about iterative or deliver something quickly. It's not about delivering something in its entirety. It's about delivering the most valuable things quickly so that they can use it and take advantage of it. You want to always think of it in that perspective. Now, sometimes you are developing systems for internal teams. That's true. In which case, your customer kind of shifts to more of an internal customer. But it's always going to be that group of people that are using it and are going to benefit from it. And if you're not aware of what their needs are, you need to take some steps to get out there and introduce yourself and get to know them better. And if your developers need that help too, because you don't have dedicated analysts or team members who can translate that information, a product owner, you want to give them an opportunity to engage with those members as well, because they're going to learn how to develop those things to make the most value for the customers. And getting through all those translation layers is not very helpful. So without going into a lot of detail, you will find that a lot of Agile development teams do actually prefer to have retrospectives and demos with the customers rather than only a product owner or a small user group, because it does give them the chance to learn directly from that interaction and hear what it is that they really wanted or didn't like about whatever's being developed for them. So always remember, Agile is first and foremost about quick, fast customer value. So I think one of the things that comes up in conversation for me a lot is, what about documentation? What about processes? What about all these other operational standards that we have to adhere to? And I remember that before I worked for the university, I worked for an ad agency. And one of our biggest customers was a big automotive customer. And that automotive customer had, not only did they have their ISO process for developing or creating cars, but they also had their software development protocol. So if anybody's familiar with the old school SDP 21 process, yeah, that was something that was part of their rigmarole too. We, as a vendor, were required to adhere to that SDP 21 process. My groups were all Agile. That was what we did. We were really good at it. We were really quick and efficient. We even had the most robust CMDB so that we could actually quickly trace everything that broke, roll it back, fix it. I mean, we were on top of things. I am bragging. They were awesome. But we did find that a lot of times when we got complaints from the customer about slow delivery, that the common theme in it all was the documentation. It was all of those things that were tied into that SDP 21 process. And we realized that, they're not really using it. It's more for the filing cabinet or to reference and say, we do have it just in case somebody comes and audits us and says, hey, you have this information. So we took a look at our processes and, we realized, is there an opportunity for us to improve this and to not get rid of or eliminate their processes, but to work around it? And, the glory of Agile is that it's flexible. And so we proposed the idea of, okay, so how about we deliver the usable things and the most valuable things first, and then we'll carve out time in subsequent releases to catch up, deliver the rest of the things that were lower value. They're not that important on day one, but we'll give them to you. Let's just kind of stagger them a little bit. And so we did that, and we changed our resource allocation model to allow for a certain amount of time in every release for technical staff to be available as well, so that they could follow up on any documentation questions that were needed for filling in the blanks. And as the release manager, I also mandated that there was at least a certain amount of information provided to me as part of the release notes. So it wasn't full documentation, but it was at least something for us to be able to go back to and say, oh, this is what that thing did, and here's what we did to make that decision, and here's when we can expect to have the subsequent documentation. And we just proposed that to the customer. And of course, they're skeptical. because they'd never really worked in any other operating processes. But after a few releases, they were thrilled because in an ad agency of all places, you need to get that stuff out there quickly. You don't get to wait months to deliver creative or digital assets or new ways of developing the websites. You do it fast. And so we just had to prove ourselves a few times. And after that, that was the ongoing process. And we renegotiated the contracts to say that's how we would deliver things to them from forevermore. So there are opportunities for Agile to still be complementary and helpful, even if you do have any type of documentation heavy processes that have to be adhered to. There's nothing they're not mutually exclusive. You can work around those things, but it really comes down to what is the most valuable thing and how do I get that most valuable thing as quickly as possible to my customer, get it in their hands. So I think some of this content will look familiar to any of you if you attended our PMCG webinar for March. But there's some really simple best practices that I think anyone trying to learn Agile can try and take advantage of. First and foremost is just keep it simple. Don't try to invent or create some magnificent process that you think the team is going to do so much better with. You're better off sticking to a tried and true format. It's recognizable. It's easy to transfer if new staff members come in. There's plenty of documentation out there. Scrum is probably one of the most popular because it is pretty lean in terms of process, and it's pretty recognizable now in its standard tools that you use. I would say if you're ever going to introduce that, start there, and then eventually you'll probably end up kind of creating your own hybrid. I think most teams end up coming up with their own sort of variation of a Scrum hybrid. And you will find if there's surveys out there that, if they say they're Scrum, they're probably a Scrum hybrid. This one's hard for a lot of people because it does take time, especially if the team is newly formed. If you're a traditional project manager, you know about the whole concept of forming, storming, norming. It's the same darn thing with Agile. And with Agile comes the next layer of let them self-organize. Let them hammer it out, let them figure out what's going to work for them, and let them get to know each other. And if you're a Scrum Master or product owner or someone kind of on the periphery a little, you have to just let them do it. You can facilitate and offer suggestions, but at the end of the day, Agile is about giving that empowerment to the team, and the team figures out what's going to work for them. So as much as you're going to want to try and help them get to there faster, don't. Let them figure it out. And if they're truly brand new to the whole thing and they've never done this before, plan for a sprint 0 or some sort of startup process to give them time to get to that point, because they will eventually land on the right way of doing things for them. You want to maintain frequent and open communication. That's not just within the team, that's also with your customers, with any type of collaboration teams that you're working with. Foster, have ice cream mixers. I know it's kind of hard to do in the pandemic, but do those coffee chats. Encourage people across the organizations to come together and get to know each other, because there's a collaboration and support aspect of Agile that's all about that teamwork. And you are probably going to find that that's one of the reasons why people gravitate toward Agile so much, is because it's more about a team and less about being dictated to. We work with the customers directly, understand their needs, and we figure out how to help them. That's a little bit more personal. Ensure that your product owner is available. This is a hard one because almost always there is somebody who has a million other jobs that they're tackling and they have been tasked with being the product owner, and then they're never available for meetings. Not good. Make them there. A Scrum Master can step in and say, hey, we need you there. If you can't be there because you're too busy, then you need to find someone else who can take that role for you. It's plain and simple.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but we've come up on time. I just wanted to give you the time check and let you wrap up.
stats are already there. And here I
know,
thought
it
I
goes
was
so
doing
quickly.
so much faster. All right, there are a few other things in here too, but real quickly, I just want to go in here and just tell you, don't laugh at me or laugh, because I really mean this one. You want to embrace Agile, I'm going to say you're going to hug that big old change bear. Just remember that every one of us is resistant to change on some level. You don't want to admit it, but you are. We all are. And it really can be on varying degrees depending on what your state of mind is at any point in time. So recognize that and just learn to just be okay with change. So it's a shift. It's a different way of thinking of things. And there are some tips that we can share with you, but if you look at it in terms of I'm going to push it off and I'm going to fight it, I'm going to control it, it's probably going to be a rocky little moment for you. But if you figure out the patterns and the routines of when change can actually work for you, you're going to find that it actually can be beneficial. And there are going to be many more times when you can adopt that change and use it to your benefit. So, go with it. It's there. Recognize that big old bear, hug it, and pretend that it has a big red bow on it and it's a gift and you want to use it to your advantage. Since we don't have a lot of time to talk about this one, Chris, I'll just say, some tips for thinking about this. I think I've heard this mentioned in other sessions before too, but it all starts with you. You got to know yourself. If you look into concepts like emotional intelligence, you have to recognize how averse to change you are as an individual. Recognize your natural tendencies. And if you are more so averse to it than others, like you feel like you really just cannot handle it, stresses you out, you want to pull your hair out, whatever the case is, you're going to want to take some steps to try and develop an appreciation for it and an acceptance for it. Break outside that mold. You can go as simple as parking in a different parking spot once a week, or just carve out a day every month when you do something you're not used to it and it would be the craziest idea you've ever done. But find some way to kind of break those patterns. And eventually you'll find that the nervousness and the tension and the stress starts to get a little bit lesser. It's okay. You'll get some baby steps in that direction. But there are some tips that I have in the notes here that I can share with folks, but we'll just send out the presentation to everyone. And you take a look at it in your time. And if you want to have any questions afterward, I'd be more than happy to follow up with anyone.